You know what's strange about road signs? They don't ask if a place is real, they assume it. White letters, green metal, and an arrow that says, "This way." And at night, when the world is reduced to beams of headlights and reflective paint, those signs become something else. Not information, a command. You're driving through Germany, or you're watching a dashcam video, or you're half asleep on a train that's rocking like a cradle built for adults who stopped believing in miracles. And you see it. A name. Bielefeld. You've heard it before. Somewhere. A map. A schedule. A throwaway line in a conversation that didn't matter. But then you tried to picture it. Not the spelling, not the dot on the map. The place. What does it smell like after rain? What does the light look like at 6:40 p.m. in winter? What does its silence sound like on a Sunday morning? You can't. And that's when the thought arrives, uninvited, like a cold finger sliding under your collar. What if the problem isn't that you've never been there? What if the problem is that it was never there to begin with? Because tonight's entry isn't about UFOs, or underground bases, or creatures in the trees. Tonight is about a city, a German city, a city with a university, a football club, a castle on a hill, and a rumor that refuses to die, whispered like a joke, that keeps showing its teeth. Bielefeld doesn't exist. Not it's boring, not it's forgettable, not I can't find it on a map. No, it doesn't exist. And if you try to prove that it does, that's exactly what they want. If you're hearing this, you weren't supposed to. This isn't part of the official story. It's not in the headlines. It's not in the reports. But it exists in fragments, in whispers, in the spaces between what we're told and what's actually true. And once you start listening, really listening, you begin to notice something. The story doesn't quite line up. This is the Tinfoil Diaries. Welcome back to the Tinfoil Diaries, the show where the shadows are organized, the coincidences are suspicious, and the punchline sometimes bites back. I'm your host. And tonight's entry is called The City That Wasn't, the Bielefeld Conspiracy. We're going to track how a single internet post became a national meme, how politicians played along, how the city itself tried to prove it exists with marketing, and how a joke can mutate into something sharper. Because this isn't just about one place. It's about how reality becomes official, how absence becomes evidence, how something can be true on paper and still feel unreal in your bones. So, lock the doors, turn down the lights, and let's open the file. Here's how the Bielefeld Conspiracy gets you. It doesn't begin with a manifesto. It doesn't begin with leaked documents. It doesn't begin with blurry photos and circles drawn in red. It begins with a conversation. Someone leans in, smiling like they're about to tell you a secret that's also a prank. And they ask you 3 questions. Just 3. 1. Do you know anyone from Bielefeld? Most people hesitate. Not because it's impossible, but because, statistically, Bielefeld doesn't live rent-free in anyone's head. It's not Berlin. It's not Munich. It's not Frankfurt, where people expect you to know someone. Bielefeld is mid-sized, practical, the kind of city that exists in the margins of attention. 2. Have you ever been to Bielefeld? Again, most people say no. Not because they couldn't, because they've never needed to. And then comes the third question, the one that tightens the wire. 3. Do you know anyone who's been to Bielefeld? And suddenly the room changes temperature. Because for 1 second, certainty develops a hairline crack. A tiny vacuum forms, an empty space where personal experience should be. And conspiracy theories? They love empty space the way fire loves oxygen. They don't need proof. They need a gap, a blank, a place for the imagination to crawl into and build a nest. And once that gap exists, the story writes itself. Because if you don't know anyone from there, and you've never been there, and you can't confirm anyone else has either, then what exactly are you trusting? Maps? Schedules? Other people's claims? And that's when the hook sets. Not deep, just deep enough. The official version of the Bielefeld Conspiracy, at least the version repeated online, goes something like this. Bielefeld is a fiction, a fabricated city, a placeholder location inserted into the public narrative. If you believe you've arrived in Bielefeld, you're actually somewhere else. A different town, a different exit, a different platform. And if you say you've met someone from Bielefeld, that's not evidence. That's infiltration. Because the conspiracy has a name for the force maintaining the illusion. Not a person, not a corporation, not even a specific agency. Just one word. Z. German for they. And the moment you hear they, your brain starts doing what brains do best when they're scared. Filling in the blanks. Because they can be anyone. They did it. They want it. They're hiding it. They're watching. Z becomes the perfect villain. Not because it's powerful, but because it's flexible. Now here's the part that makes this meme a masterpiece. It's designed to win no matter what you answer. If you say no to the 3 questions, congratulations, you've proven Bielefeld doesn't exist. If you say yes, congratulations, you're compromised, an agent, a dupe, a planted witness. Either way, the conspiracy survives. It's airtight, self-sealing, like a coffin with the nails on the inside. And that structure, this unfalsifiable logic, mirrors real conspiracy thinking almost perfectly. Is it satire? Yes. But it's satire built from real bones. Isolate a gap. Assign a hidden actor. Make evidence irrelevant. Turn contradiction into confirmation. That's not just internet humor. That's a psychological engine. Okay, step out of the fog with me. Let's separate what's verifiable from what's vibes. Fact. Bielefeld is a real city in the German state of North Rhine-Westphalia. It has a documented history, institutions, and all the infrastructure you'd expect a city to have. Fact. The Bielefeld doesn't exist story is widely recognized as an internet meme, satirical, linked to early German online culture in the 1990s. That's the baseline. But here's where it gets interesting. Because a lot of conspiracy theories live and die in small corners. This one didn't. This one leaked into public life. It became a national wink. And when the joke gets repeated by powerful people, it changes. It becomes folklore. It becomes identity. it becomes something you can't fully control anymore. At one point, even German political leaders publicly referenced the gag, playing along with the idea that Bielefeld might not exist. And then, because modern reality is allergic to ignoring anything, Bielefeld did something that feels like it was engineered in a lab to make conspiracists salivate. The city leaned in hard. In 2019, officials launched a publicity stunt, a challenge offering a large cash prize to anyone who could provide incontrovertible evidence that Bielefeld does not exist. A city offering money to prove itself fake. Now, if you're a normal person, you laugh and you move on. But if you're conspiracy minded, that's not a joke. That's an admission. Because what better camouflage than self-debunking? If you can label the conspiracy harmless, you can file it away. You can smother it with humor. You can turn anyone who insists into the weird one who can't take a joke. That's containment. And here's a real-world detail that makes it even stranger. There were reports of a legal dispute connected to this stunt. Someone arguing that they had effectively proven the city's non-existence. And the courts treating the entire premise as what it was: marketing, not metaphysics. A courtroom discussing whether a city exists because of a meme. History doesn't move in a straight line. It spirals. And sometimes the spiral laughs while it tightens. You might be thinking, okay, it's a meme. It's funny. Germany has good deadpan humor. End of story. But here's where the Bielefeld conspiracy earns its longevity. It targets something real. Invisibility. Not supernatural invisibility, cultural invisibility. Bielefeld isn't tiny. It isn't a village hidden behind a forest. It's a mid-sized city, real people, real lives, real routines. But in the global imagination, it doesn't register as a destination. And in the modern world, if you're not a destination, you're background noise. A rounding error. A blank space people step over while chasing brighter lights. That's the horror under the joke. A place can be real and still feel unreal because attention has become the fuel of existence. And when a place becomes culturally invisible, it becomes available for projection. People can paint anything onto it because there's no strong image to contradict them. That's when Bielefeld doesn't exist stops being a gag and starts being a symbol. Not of one city's supposed non-existence, but of a bigger, uglier idea. That reality can be socially negotiated. That perception can be engineered. That the public record can be curated. And in an era of deep fakes, disinformation, and algorithm-fed reality tunnels, a joke about a city being fake doesn't feel as impossible as it used to. That's the modern twist. The meme survives not because it's clever, but because it harmonizes with the anxiety of the age. Okay, let's say it clearly. The Bielefeld Conspiracy is satire, a meme, a national in-joke. But why does it feel like a real conspiracy when you say it out loud at night? Because it uses the same psychological tricks real conspiracies do, just with a grin. 1. It's a ritual. Those 3 questions are an incantation. Ask them slowly, in the right room, and you can watch certainty wobble. 2. It's unfalsifiable by design. If you can't prove it, it's true. If you can prove it, you're part of it. That's not just comedy. That's the skeleton key of paranoid logic. 3. It weaponizes social distance. Most listeners outside the region don't know someone from Bielefeld. Most haven't been there. So the evidence becomes the absence of personal connection. And absence, when it's widespread enough, starts to look meaningful. 4. It uses they. Z. The faceless organizer behind the curtain. Satire works because it exaggerates a real instinct. When people feel confusion, they assume someone must be controlling it. Sometimes that instinct is wrong. Sometimes it isn't. 5. It's the perfect internet organism. Short, repeatable, flexible. It can be pasted into any conversation like a sticker. And because it's harmless, it slips past defenses. No one argues. They smile. And a smile is how ideas cross borders without needing papers. Now, if you want the darker interpretation, I promised I'd bring it. So here it is. Satire is a Trojan horse. It gets inside the city, and once it's inside, you can load it with anything you want. So ask yourself this. What if the conspiracy isn't that Bielefeld is fake? What if the conspiracy is that the Bielefeld story is a rehearsal, a harmless drill, a way to see how fast people will repeat something absurd, as long as it's fun? And if people will repeat something absurd for fun, how fast will they repeat it for fear? That's the layer that lingers. That's the part that doesn't feel like a joke at 3 a.m. Because once you train a population to treat reality like a meme, you can sell them anything, even emptiness. Here's a final twist worth sitting with. At some point, Bielefeld doesn't exist stopped being an accusation. It became marketing. The meme became a brand asset. And that's a modern kind of alchemy. A city accused of non-existence, turning that accusation into attention, attention into tourism, tourism into legitimacy. But the paranoid part of the brain, quiet, watchful, hears that and thinks, if something can be monetized hard enough, it can stop feeling real. And if something stops feeling real, it becomes easier to deny, easier to rewrite, easier to erase. So maybe the real conspiracy isn't that Bielefeld is a fake place. Maybe the real conspiracy is that in the attention economy, existence is negotiable. And if you can do that to a city, what can you do to a person? Okay, here's the verdict. Fact. Bielefeld is a real German city with documented history and modern institutions. Fact. The Bielefeld doesn't exist idea is widely treated as satire, an early internet meme that became national folklore and was later embraced publicly as a joke. Now the theory is that Z maintains an illusion, and every attempt to verify Bielefeld only strengthens the cover story. Do I think Bielefeld literally doesn't exist? No. But I do think this meme reveals something sharp. Reality is not only what's true, it's what's repeated, recognized, and remembered. And in a world where attention is a currency, invisibility starts to look like non-existence. So maybe the conspiracy isn't that Bielefeld is fake. Maybe the conspiracy is that modern systems can make real things feel unreal just by starving them of attention. Tonight, after you close this entry, open a map. Any map. Zoom out until cities turn into dots. And then pick one. A name you've never spoken out loud. A place you've never smelled, never touched, never tasted. And ask yourself, if nobody talks about it, if nobody remembers it, if nobody can swear they've been, how long before it starts to vanish? Not from the earth, from the story. Good night. If this entry got your skin buzzing, don't just close the app and go back to sleep. Follow the Tinfoil Diaries wherever you're listening so you don't miss what surfaces next. And if you want to help this signal travel, leave a 5-star rating and a short review. It tells the algorithm we're not whispering into the void. Share this with one person who still asks questions, even when the answers get uncomfortable. And if you've got a lead, an article, a document, a name, a strange coincidence you can't shake, send it in. Because out there, someone's always watching the noise. We're listening for the pattern. Ask the 3 questions again, but don't smile this time.